I work in the recruitment department here, and I also am the student success advocate here at Camden County College. I'm going to go over just a couple tips prior to writing, and the first thing I'm going to start with is how many of you read? Like read often novels? Well, that's great. I'm sure if you haven't noticed already, it kind of helps broadens your vocabulary, and the best way to become a better writer is to become a good reader. Because this is the best way to kind of, like I said, improve your vocabulary. And also, if you get a feel for a different way, a style of writing when you're reading these books, it kind of gives you your own twist on writing. And another tip for prior to writing is to create an outline. So this can be anything. Like some of the papers I handed out to you are just an idea of flowcharts or anything that you can kind of fill in, maybe spiderweb type thing, just to kind of get your idea flowing and kind of have a clear, distinct way that you're going to write your paper. So I put this on here, which I actually just spoke to one of the professors who's in the writing area who's going to go over this in class today about the 5-paragraph essay. It's so important that if you get any kind of writing down, it's that 5 paragraphs because you can kind of apply that to everything. Now, sometimes your body paragraphs, you might have 5 or 6 of them instead of just 3, but it's still the same kind of style. You need an introduction, you need a conclusion, and then you need to make those points in between. And the last thing but not least, that you get from your reading and your writing is to be creative, kind of get your own twist on how you write. Types of writing. So there's formal and informal. Now, it's really important that you identify the type of writing style that your professor's looking for. I'm sure you know in all of your classes, your teachers want different things. But this is just a good example because as you can see, the formal writing versus the informal writing is completely different. So if you're sending an email to a friend, the informal is probably fine. But if you're sending an email to a boss or an employee, you should always write formal. So if you just want to go ahead and read those just to kind of get an idea, you can see like an informal, it's a lot more like question marks, it kind of sounds like a conversation more than it sounds like they're trying to make a point.
So how do you get out of that habit? Because all of my professors say that, or even the tutors even say to me that I write like I talk.
Yeah.
All the time.
So,
and it's like I get nervous now when I go to write a paper because I'm like, I don't know, does it sound like I spoke it or, you know?
The most important things is changing those little things, like don't say can't, say cannot. You know what I mean? It's just little things like that. Like just make sure, like the best way to kind of get out of it is to continuously practice and be aware of what, you know, like when you pause when you're talking to somebody, make sure that's a period or a comma. You know what I mean? It's just like genuinely practice. I mean, practice, I say practice for everything. That's why like the only way to become a good writer is to continuously doing it. And that's what I just talked with that professor too, because she was even saying to me, she was like, the only way these kids get better is to practice journaling. It doesn't matter what they're writing about, but just getting in the habit of writing, you can get better and better. Your next is your styles of writing. So it's important to identify a writing style. This will control your writing. So there's numerous types of writing. I don't know if you guys have had, you should have had your English courses already, but if you didn't, then you go over kind of descriptive, narrative, persuasive, compare, contrast, and research. They're all totally different. So, I mean, I touched on all of these, but just for example, compare and contrast, it's a totally different layout. You have to kind of state your points on each section of it. So whether or not it's, if you're comparing and contrasting apples and oranges, you want to state the examples and supporting evidence. Like you need to be able to prove everything you're saying, basically. And there's different formats for all of those. And the best thing I can say, if your teacher doesn't give you an exact format of what she's looking for, Google works great, OWL, Purdue, like all those different sites, go on and look for exemplars because they're great ways to kind of get an idea of just a different layout. Read other people's compare and contrast papers. Maybe look for something that's not on the topic that you're writing about, just to avoid plagiarism or stealing someone else's ideas, but it still kind of gives you an idea of how to set up the paper.
Yeah, I don't think that's for
Yeah, of course.
research, like when you Google it, like do they come up with like little forms like this, like with the
Actually, yeah, you can look stuff up like that.
Okay.
Yeah, there is stuff like that that's on there. Because that's what I do. Like that's my number one thing. I'm in my master's, and for all of my papers, like they'll give us, we have to write evaluation reports. So I have to write like section by section everything about a child. I just Google other people's and read them over to get an idea of how they're talking about things and how they're saying things, what's the correct way to say things. And it kind of goes over the same thing when you're writing any kind of paper. Even for some of your research papers, and especially in that field, if you look up like a study or read other people's empirical evidence and things like that, kind of gives you an idea of how to start writing. And another way with what you were saying, how to get out of that writing, read other people's professional writing. Kind of get your own twist on it by reading theirs too.
Yeah, my professor did that a lot, and it was a lot easier. Like I did better getting out of comp two because she gave us so many different examples. So like as the semester on, they said it didn't sound so much, but I still get nervous.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, you're always gonna feel that way. I have my nervous tics, and I'm terrible with commas. I put commas after everything because I pause after everything when I talk. So I'm always like, oh, comma here, comma there, but it's just something you do. You just gotta be reminded to stop doing it when you're
Well, that, and
writing.
I never hear my EDs and S's. Like I'll read the EDs and S's in the sentence, but it's not written down. I don't know why.
We all do stuff like that. It's fun. Does that answer your question now?
Yeah, so like I was thinking, like I have a big research paper. I think it's actually kind of confusing. It's my first one like this. But I wanted to like compare like one paper to another paper and maybe read both and see which one I thought was more like professional, I guess.
Okay. Like both your papers or someone else's?
Like I was thinking of researching other people's papers
Okay.
and then comparing two
That's a good idea.
and seeing like if they said, you know what I mean, or
Yeah,
blah,
like
blah, blah,
exactly.
you know, and
Especially
then-
with like research, you want to be like most importantly, don't put any of your own personal thoughts in it. Like
Really?
no, research papers should be solely on research. I mean, it depends what your teacher's looking for, but like for instance, if I'm writing about a theory, and if it's APA or if it's a research paper, I'm not allowed at all to put how I feel about the topic. Not until at the end, maybe if they ask for a personal opinion.
Okay.
So unless your teacher says, I want to know what you think about this, you should directly talk about the information and what they say about it, basically.
Okay.
But it depends on what's being asked of you, but that's just from my experience. Research papers are kind of strictly citing sources and talking about the material.
This is the first time she said I have to give some kind of presentation and like I'm not very computer person.
Well, do you have what she's asking for?
I was going to bring in a YouTube video and see if I could somehow put it onto my flash drive.
Could
And
do
if I
that.
couldn't, I was going to ask the guys at the library to help me do it.
Yeah, if you have a rubric and you want to email it to me throughout this week, I'll give you my card and you can email it to me and I can take a look at it and just kind of go over.
It's like boring stuff. It's like tetanus.
It's all right. I have a lot of friends that were in the medical field, so it's not, I understand.
Thanks.
The next thing I'm going to go over with you is kind of format of writing, so that kind of goes over with what we were just talking about. Now, I'm most familiar with APA, and when I talked to the writing professor here, I was told that you guys do a lot of MLA. So I'm sure if you've done a couple of them now, MLA is very different than APA. So APA is a total separate page for the title. Even like down to your heading, everything's going to be on that separate page. And then MLA, everything's right on one page. So you can kind of dig right into your writing immediately with MLA. But this is just to kind of give you an idea of the different citations and what they look like, and how like what the publicist kind of emphasizes more in the citation. So with MLA, you need works cited, to where with APA, I need a whole separate reference page. Now with MLA, do you guys have to do like a whole separate reference page at all? You do? Okay.
Well, they call it a site.
A cited, yeah. It's just different terminology, really. I mean, it's basically all the same thing. It's just the setup's a little different. So this is an APA example. So I know for research, like big research papers and stuff like that, you might do APA,
Okay.
just because a lot of the times with research, you do an abstract and you do like totally different setup. There's
Okay.
going to be introduction, abstract, but it depends on what your teacher's asking for.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes into it. So you would put your school, your section, your name, your professor, and the date, and then whatever you're studying. So this says, can medication cure obesity in children? A review in literature.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by kind of researching. And then this is an example of MLA, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with if that's what you're using. So that kind of goes with like your date, your name and your date and your class and stuff is all up at the right. So it's not too big of a deal. It's a little easier, but you can go right off into starting with an introduction with something like that. Now for preparation, this kind of goes into what I was saying with yours, looking up examples and kind of asking your teacher what she wants. Another really good thing you can do with your professors, which I do every single time, ask for an exemplar. If this is an assignment that she assigns regularly in the class each year, I'm sure she's got plenty of papers that she got A's on. Ask her to post one. Don't copy it, but it's just a great idea to see what your teacher sees as an A. Because every teacher is different. what you think's an A, your teacher might see it as, oh no, that's C material, like that wasn't very good, and you're like, well, that was my best paper. So it's just kind of good, talk to your teacher, see what they want from you. Another thing when you're writing, try not to edit. Get all those thoughts, make a terribly messy paper at first, because at least you get all these ideas down on the paper, and you're not skipping over anything that you know is really important or sticking out in your mind. So it's best to just kind of go back and edit afterwards. Try and get everything that you're trying to say down first. Okay, and this is a big thing. Does anybody have proofreaders? Does anybody have anybody proofread their paper? Okay, good. That's like a really, really good habit to get into. Every single one of the papers that I turn in I have a proofreader read at least 2 of them, honestly, because it helps so much. I make so many silly mistakes that I don't catch, and like my papers are being graded so intensely. So it's so great to get in that habit of having someone you can rely on and trust just to look over it. It makes you feel better too. So you want to make sure that your proofreader is someone you can trust, maybe a teacher, even a child or a parent, but just make sure that they're somebody that knows what they're talking about. And then you want to double check your proofreader's work, because we're all humans, we all make mistakes. Let's be real. Your proofreader could be totally just making mistakes just as much as you. But it's also good because by reading over the edits that they make, you can help prevent making those edits next time. So just getting in the habit. I mean, I'm talking something after your 5th or 6th paper of seeing it, you'll start to say, okay, I always seem to put a comma after that, and I really don't need to. I can just end the sentence and start a new one. But just kind of picking up on where your current mistakes are. And this is just a little quote. I don't know, I like this. You're always learning, mistakes are opportunities to get better. I truly live by that, and I definitely think within education and school, I mean, that's all it is. And next, I'm going to go over page setup. So this is kind of what I was saying in earlier with the 5-paragraph essay. You have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So this is just kind of an idea of what's expected in each of them. So for your introduction, it's best to start with an intention-getting sentence. So that's anything. You just want to draw the reader in. So like a lot of people start papers with quotes, maybe like a middle excerpt of the paper that they're writing, just something so that the author goes, like, that's different. Like, I want to read on more. Then you want to introduce your topic. So right away, don't kind of dilly around with it too much. Kind of state what you're going to be talking about. And then you want to transition into a thesis statement, which kind of gives the reader an idea of where this paper is going to head. So for even like a research topic paper, if you're going to talk about medication, you want to go into like the 3 areas of medication is going to be affecting or what it's going to be focusing on. Now for your body paragraphs, and this applies for all of them, what you want to do is you want to have a topic, and then supporting details, and then examples. So if you have 2 supporting details, you want to give examples of those things each. So just for an example, so if I'm going to write a paper about Pavlov, and my first body paragraph is going to be about his classical conditioning theory, I need to have examples of where he studied that, or an example of, you can even say like the experiment he did with the dog, and like how he trained the dog to know, like that's just, you want to fully engage your reader to understand exactly what you mean by when you say certain things. So my teacher always says to me, and this is one of the best advice I ever got, you want to be able to give it to somebody who has no idea, never taken a psychology class, or like if you're writing about a medical, never taken any kind of nursing or medical field, and they'd be able to understand it. So always write in clear and cut so that anyone can understand what you're trying to say. And lastly but not least, your conclusion. You want to restate your thesis, so kind of give a little bit of an idea of what you were talking about in introduction again. You want to revisit your main points. Now you don't need to rewrite all of them, but just kind of re-engage your reader about what this whole thing was about. And then your final statement, and like this is where I was telling you that if your teacher wants your personal opinion, this is where you could give it. Like I know for all of my papers I have to end with saying, as a school psychologist, this is how I would deal with this, or this is how I would interpret this. And these things come in handy because I just like these because I feel like it's a really good way for you to kind of see everything mapped out, kind of makes the paper less overwhelming. So you can put your main topics here, and then you can put those details that you find, maybe where you found them, and then your conclusion and your thesis again. And then this just kind of gives you space to kind of write it out. So even if you were to do keywords and maybe like a page in your textbook, you got it. So always be documenting where you found things just because it helps for you to kind of touch back on it when you go to actually write your paper. But this is good just to keep out, because if your teacher in the beginning of class says, we're going to be writing a paper about the Civil War, and then the next chapter you read is the Civil War, and you're going through in class, be like, oh, you know, page 67 has really good points about, you know, this excerpt in history. I'll write about that as my first main topic, page 63. Then you can go online, find something that kind of relates to that, write the website down. And this is just all good places where you won't get confused. And if organization is something you struggle with, this is a really great way to kind of stay on track and not get mixed up. So how to avoid plagiarism. If you use an author-specific word or words, you must place those words within quotation marks and credit the source. Even if you're using your own words, if you obtain the information or ideas you're presenting from a source, you must document the source. And if a piece of information isn't common knowledge, you need to provide a source. So this is just something that, I mean, I feel like it's more something you got in trouble with in high school. By now, we kind of got an idea of how to not do this, but still, it comes up all the time, especially, do you guys use Turnitin at all?
Mm-hmm.
That gets everybody.
My last name.
Yeah, everything's been used, and it's so hard to not technically use someone else's information because everything's been used. So it's so important to kind of make sure that you cite everything that you write that's not your own original thought or idea. And another thing here, this is just a tip, which I'm sure we already know, but I like to say it anyway. If you copy a paper from a classmate, buy a paper from the internet, copy a whole passage from a book, article, website without citing an author, you are plagiarizing. So that's just kind of examples of everything that you copy information from is considered pretty much plagiarism. Now, steps before submission. So this is basically everything we covered, but the final steps to kind of give you an idea of what you should do before you hand a paper in. So you want to do the rough draft, put all those ideas down, start your writing immediately, dive right into it. Then you step 2, you want to look over it, check out your grammar, your spelling, then edit, make these corrections. So that could be when you send it to a proofreader, and then your final copy. Once you've made all these corrections, you send it to your proofreader, you can rewrite, or you can send in your final copy from that point on. And use your resources. I'm a big fan of this tutoring center. I mean, every time I'm in there, I think they do a great job. I know a lot of the students that reach out to me. If I can't help them, I'll send them to someone over there. And most of the time, their problem gets worked out. I think it just definitely helps to kind of have somebody to kind of sit there with you sometimes. Like, I know for me, that's all it takes, is someone just sitting there being like, okay, let's do this. Just a kind of helping hand and someone to help kind of ground you when you're trying to get something done. The library, for you, those of you who are unsure of how to do MLA or APA, if you go to them, they can show you how to cite things, they can show you where certain books are, information, articles, movies, anything that you can use towards your papers. The internet can be great. Wikipedia is not the best source. I mean, we all use it, I've used it, but just be careful that the information's coming from somewhere accurate. And then films, and another great thing is interview these professionals. So if you're writing a term on a doctor, a teacher, anything like that, go directly to the source, talk to them, and you can cite them. And that's still like great information that no one else in the class is gonna have.
So when you cite like a person that you talk to, can you just put it in quotes?
Technically, yeah. So for APA, there's probably a totally different way than MLA to cite it. So depending on, I'm not sure, did they have you do MLA for medical?
It doesn't even say on here. I'm like very confused right now.
Well, I'll look over it with you, but that's an important question. Ask her that though, your teacher. But so MLA cites things totally different for things like that. But you can absolutely do that. And you can use annotated bibliography. There's websites that show you exactly how to cite things too. Like Purdue OWL, you can go on there for MLA citing, and it'll go over it completely with you. But if you have, is that your rubric for what's being asked of you?
It's actually confusing me right now because it says bring a copy of the article with you, and then it says give me your journal article. So do I have to write one?
I'll look over that with you. I think I know what you have to do, but it's probably a little bit more complicated. But it's all doable, don't worry. But that's pretty much it. This is my contact information, so if you have any questions or anything like that and you want to get in touch with me, I have no problem sitting down, helping anybody, going over anything. And I have my cards here too, so if that helps, if you want to grab one of my cards, because I know I will forget my last names are kind of challenging. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you.